I want you to think about this. Gohan basically stops training after the Cell Games. This is antithetical to everything he promised both to himself and the memory of his father. Now, while I don't mind Gohan toning down the training after a while, it is important to note the only other person on the main timeline Earth that could potentially match Gohan's power at the time was Vegeta. A man who had already proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that he could not be trusted with training equipment, much less trusted to safeguard the Earth. So Gohan not training at all is rather foolish, from both a character perspective and a writer's perspective. And we know he didn't train pretty much at all in between the Cell Games and high school, because Vegeta states clearly that he is actually weaker during the World Martial Arts Tournament than he was during the Cell Games. Now, Gohan has never been depicted as stupid, or even truly naive after the Saiyan saga. In fact, it's often the exact opposite. He's usually depicted as highly intelligent. Not Bulma levels, but pretty dang smart in his own right. So why would he just stop training? Well, let's go over the obvious arguments. Gohan couldn't study if he trained constantly, or Gohan couldn't help with baby Goten if he trained, or Gohan couldn't help around the house or farm. Yeah, about all of those, Gohan knows no less than 3 people who know the multi and split form techniques, and those are just the ones still alive at this point. He is also already very skilled with ki use, even at a young age, so given very little time, he could definitely learn it. Now, while it does split the user's strength between copies, given his raw power at the end of the Cell Saga, splitting himself into 2, 3, or even 4 Gohans isn't going to be an immense detriment. Well, at least not outside of an actual planetary threat. Having this technique would allow him to study with one body and at least maintain his edge with the other. When you consider he is half Saiyan, and as such can get stronger by pushing himself in combat, it stands to reason that the 2 splits of him fighting intensely would both get a tiny bit stronger every day, even if it was just by the tiniest amount. Remerging likely wouldn't show much progress at the end of each day, but it would probably show some over time. Now, how do I know this is at least a moderately effective training method? Well, Piccolo uses it, and I can assure you if it had no real effect, he wouldn't. This technique would also allow Gohan to help with anything else Chi-Chi needed, things like shopping, Goten's diapers, or chores. Admittedly, we don't know the technique's limits, however I am relatively certain Piccolo uses it for at least an hour at a time to train. So it could probably be maintained for at least an hour a day, assuming there even is some kind of inbuilt time limit or strain. Now, even if for some contrived reason Gohan could not use this technique, and I honestly see no reason why that could be the case, he still has superhuman strength, speed, reflexes, and senses. So even in between doing everything he needs to for his family and finding time for himself, he could still find at least half an hour to train every other day. This wouldn't be as effective as a concentrated, continuous effort, but it would at least mean his power wouldn't diminish over time. Now, why do I think this is important? It's because Dragon Ball Z from Arrival through the Cell Games was clearly, at least in large part, a passing of the torch, even if that wasn't the author's original intention, and frankly could be argued was more Gohan's story than Goku's. We follow Gohan through the journey of a sheltered, cripplingly shy toddler growing into a reluctant, often terrified fighter, and finally we watch him take those last fateful steps into a hero, along with the pain being a hero can bring a person. The feeling conveyed as Gohan looks up at the heavens and can feel his father's presence so strongly that he sees his image in the sky is so heartfelt, it's almost palpable. It sends this message that even when something we love ends, it's not just over. Whatever ends, as long as we loved it, will always be a part of our lives. We will always carry those memories, the good and the bad. This is the kind of thing that should have changed Gohan forever. At the beginning of the series, Gohan was terrified to fight Nappa or Vegeta in the Saiyan saga. But after everything with Nappa, after watching people murdered in front of him for the crime of defending their home, and coming to that horrific realization, with little prompting, he did fight Vegeta. Even as a child, he learned and understood the consequences of not fighting that kind of enemy. And let's be honest, that's not really something someone can ever unlearn. When he kicks Dodoria to save Dende, he did not hold back. If that kick had managed to break the spiky bubblegum man's neck, Gohan probably wouldn't have felt any real sense of guilt about it. Now, while the Team 4-star version of Gohan's ascension into Super Saiyan 2 is very well done, it's certainly not accurate. Gohan was never afraid to kill Cell. He was not a pacifist. His real reason for being terrified of that fight was because he truly believed if he went all the way and fully lost himself to his own power, it would fundamentally change him, and not for the better. Frankly, he was clearly afraid he would snap and kill everyone. And since he was fully aware of how little control he had of himself during his outbursts, it's a completely understandable fear. And was he wrong? No. No, he was not. The ascension into Super Saiyan 2 dialed up all of his emotions, including some he had honestly never displayed before and would almost never display afterwards. In this form, he is shown, while fully aware, to be cruel, arrogant, and near blinded by his own power. None of these things are the real Gohan, but that didn't stop this transformation from bringing out the absolute worst in a person who, outside of what I can only describe as rage-induced fugue states, had never shown that they could be any of those things. To be honest, I have no problem with this setup in general. It would normally teach a character humility or heightened situational and self-awareness once they realized what they almost did or almost allowed to happen because they lost control. They're going to do their damnedest not to ever let it happen again. However, in Gohan's story, this doesn't really seem to be the case. It almost seems like he subconsciously overcorrected because he was terrified of losing control like that again, which would frankly have been better than what we wound up with. Having Gohan confront his own inner demons and slowly come to realize that he'd let himself lose or even suppress the vast majority of the power he gained to protect the people on the planet he loved because he was too terrified of himself, only to realize too late his lack of willingness to confront his own emotions earlier meant he didn't have the power or skill to stop Majin Buu from tearing apart everything he cared about. His ultimate form power-up could have been a result of him learning to properly let go of his subconscious restraint while maintaining self-control, using his connection to his loved ones as a sort of mental anchor instead of an old Kai Thomas the tank engineering around him for hours on end. Then, after the Buu saga, the near half-caste character assassination that is the beginnings of Super happens, and Gohan gets it the worst. He has apparently grown so weak by the resurrection of Frieza, it takes everything he has just to become a basic Super Saiyan, a state he could maintain as a child for over a week with no adverse side effects, even in his sleep. This adult Gohan has a wife and a daughter he should want to protect, and he knows that neither Goku or Vegeta are reliable in that endeavor. Both of them have a severe deficiency when it comes to actually dealing with threats, even planet-killing sociopathic monster threats. So a reasonably intelligent person, which Gohan as a character definitely should be, would not rely on either of them for that particular responsibility. And let's be honest, the rest of the Z-Fighters don't really have the raw power to deal with Dragon Ball Super's main threats, even if a few of their weaker members could solo a lot of anime universes on their own. Gohan has seemingly never learned the lesson that he needs to keep himself in at least a capable state if he wants to protect what's dear to him, even after a lifetime of having that lesson reinforced over and over again. If this were an intentional character flaw, I would understand. I wouldn't like it, but I would understand. Unfortunately, it almost certainly isn't intentional. It is frankly an absolute betrayal of the hope and growth Gohan as a character represented. A scared child who once hid behind his father's legs when meeting friendly, smiling people, slowly becoming a skilled survivor able to handle any dangers the wilds could throw at him, then into a terrified fledgling martial artist pushed to fight a killer without any other options, further on into a clever, situationally aware ally for his friends and family. Finally, stepping out of the shadow of those titans surrounding him and standing in the sun for the very first time, and eventually realizing, without the blinding darkness of those titans' shadows, he could see his own strength, and it far surpassed the titans he once relied on for shelter. This was Gohan's story. What came next was not. What came next was a twisted parody of what could have been. What came next was a character's writing betraying everything they had grown into, everything they had been or could become cast to the wayside, for the sake of bringing even more twisted parodies into the foreground. Son Gohan is one of my favorite characters in all of anime. In all of fiction, he did not deserve this kind of treatment by the writers of the Dragon Ball Super anime or by Toriyama himself. That Son Gohan is gone, replaced by a poorly written side note. He lives on now only in reruns, and the memories of the fans who watched him grow from a frightened toddler left in the wilderness into a warrior surpassing even Goku. A reluctant at times, but powerful and pure-hearted hero. That is the Gohan I choose to remember. For some reason, my normal sign-off sounds wrong here, so I'll just say, thank you for listening.